Many people consider Joe Pesci's Oscar-winning acting in Goodfellas to be one of the greatest performances in cinematic history. His character, Tommy DeVito, is based off the real-life Thomas DeSimone, and it's been claimed that they changed the name because Martin Scorsese wanted to tone down the psychopathic nature of the real-life person because he was worried that if they stuck to reality, then audiences would find the actual acts of DeSimone to be unrealistic because they were so random and brutal. Here is who mob associate Thomas DeSimone really was. Tommy DeSimone, who went by the nickname Two Guns, was born on June 6, 1946. He was the youngest of 8 children and grew up in the South Ozone area of Queens in New York City. 2 of his 3 older brothers would go on to become associates of the Gambino family. But Tommy went on a slightly different path after an introduction to Lucchese family capo regime. Paul Vario, at the age of 15, started him on a path to that crew. In 1964, he dropped out of high school after completing the 10th grade. Physically, he was very different from the actor who would later make him famous. He was very tall, standing at 6'2", and also skinny, with a weight of 175 pounds. 2 of DeSimone's closest associates were Jimmy the Gent Burke and Henry Hill. In his autobiography, Wiseguy, Henry Hill describes the young Tommy being a skinny kid in a Wiseguy suit with a pencil mustache. He also said that DeSimone had a unique way of carrying his handgun. Rather than keep in his waistband, he instead kept it in a paper bag that he would carry in his hand like it was his lunch. The trio would commit many violent crimes together with a specialization in hijacking. A complaint form from DeSimone's now declassified FBI files gives us an example of how these hijackings worked. At about 7:15 on October 9, 1966, an REA truck loaded with 187 fur coats was hijacked in Manhattan at the corner of 7th Avenue and 14th Street. The driver was stopped at a red light when an armed man appeared pointing a gun at him. The driver was forced out of the truck and placed in another car, where he was then driven around the city for over an hour before being released unharmed in Yonkers. He was ordered the whole time to keep his gaze straight ahead and not look at the other men in the car. The truck had been on its way to deliver the furs to Newark Airport, where they were then going to be shipped to different customers across the country. The insured value for this merchandise was almost $200,000, which in 2025 is now equal to the value of more than $2 million. The truck was recovered the next day in Jersey City, abandoned at a gas station with its cargo missing. All attempts to find fingerprints came back negative. The driver reported that the hijackers were 3 men, one who had the gun and later drove the car whose description matches DeSimone, one who sat in the back seat of the car that might have been Jimmy Burke or Henry Hill, and a third unseen man who drove the truck away. A month later, the FBI received a tip about a business in Queens selling furs that were worth $500 at the steep discount of $100 apiece. But when they went to check it out, there was nothing to see, and the business owner plus his employees denied that this liquidation sale took place. But in November of 1969, New York City police detectives did recover some of the merchandise stolen during the heist and returned them to REA. After this, the investigation pretty much stalled until a few years later, when in a follow-up interview, a witness whose name was retracted identified DeSimone and Burke from photographs. Thomas DeSimone was arrested and brought in for a police interview, where he declined to say anything. They were first tried in 1975, which resulted in a hung jury. A second trial had the same results, and a third ended in a mistrial. After 3 failures, the government dropped the charges. While DeSimone might have been under law enforcement's radar when the 1969 hijacking occurred, the police were well acquainted with him by the mid-1970s. The FBI profile on him listed that he had numerous arrests, with the latest for a 1975 hijacking. On April 7, 1967, when DeSimone and Henry Hill were in their early 20s, they committed what would later be known as the Air France robbery. This caper could be seen as a prequel for the more famous Lufthansa heist a decade later. Robert "Frenchie" McMahon was a daytime security guard at the airline's cargo terminal. Here, US dollars exchanged in Asia would arrive on plane and then be transported to the cargo building, where it would then be stored for an armored truck to later pick up and transport to the bank. As Henry Hill would later recount to authorities, McMahon tipped off Burke about a large cash deposit that was coming in that weekend, and he gave him a copy of the key to the building's safe. Hill and DeSimone were told to get the largest suitcase they could find and bring it to the building just before midnight, when the nighttime security guard would be on his lunch break. Two men walking into the building with a suitcase was not suspicious, as passengers who lost luggage were always coming in and out at odd hours from their flights. DeSimone and Hill entered the building without being detected, and using a map that Frenchie drew, they easily found the safe room. They entered with the key he provided and walked out with the suitcase now full of $420,000. No one bothered them, and no one was hurt. The theft was not detected until the following Monday, when a Wells Fargo truck arrived to take possession of the money, only to discover that it was now long gone. In his book, Henry Hill described multiple murders that Tommy DeSimone committed. The two that are most well known to the public are Billy Batts and Spider, as their deaths were depicted in Goodfellas. Both murders are accurate in their portrayals from the book to the screen. Billy Batts, whose real name was William Benvena, was a made member of the Gambino family, and according to Mafia rules, DeSimone should have never put his hands on him. While Spider, real name Michael Gianco, came from a Mafia-connected family, they didn't know his fate until Henry Hill went forward with his story. To this day, his body is still missing. According to Henry Hill, Tommy DeSimone's very first murder was a random person walking past them on the street when he was 17 years old. He did not know the man and only told Henry, "Watch this," before he shot him. The fourth murder that Henry Hill knew of was a warehouse foreman that refused to let Jimmy Burke unload a truck of stolen merchandise in his building. The man lived in a rural part of New Jersey. DeSimone and another mob associate named Stanley Diamond were ordered by Burke to pay a visit at the foreman's home to rough him up, so he would no longer be a future problem. But DeSimone was angry about how far they needed to travel to perform this mission, and in his rage, he lost control and ended up beating the man to death. The fifth murder Hill knew of was Dominic Sassani. He was the best friend and business partner of Burke, but Burke became suspicious that the man had become a police informant, and he ordered Tommy to kill him. Unaware that he was in danger, Sassani got into a car with DeSimone and Burke, with DeSimone sitting in the back. Tommy wrapped a cord around the man's neck and strangled him to death as Burke watched. His body was later buried at Robert's Lounge, a bar owned by Burke that doubled as his criminal headquarters. DeSimone's sixth murder victim is believed to be Ronald Giroux, who was also known as Foxy, on December 18, 1974. The two were rumored to be friends that performed hijackings together. DeSimone had been dating Foxy's sister, and one night he beat her up. This prompted Foxy to make threats to other people that he was going to kill DeSimone in retaliation. When word got back to Tommy, he decided to act first. He went to Foxy's apartment and knocked on the door. When Foxy answered, Tommy shot him 3 times in the face. 2 months later, in February of 1975, Tommy DeSimone married his wife Angela, who was also called Cookie. When the FBI interviewed her that year, she was 5 months pregnant, and the couple lived at his parents' home. His FBI file also states that he was married in 1966 and had 1 child with that woman. They are noted as having separated in 1969. DeSimone admitted that he had a common-law relationship with this woman for 6 months, but denied ever marrying her or having a child. While being capable of and committing acts of violence are a necessary skill for a career in organized crime, Tommy DeSimone was on the extreme end of the violence curve, with many who knew him labeling the man as a psychopath. Perhaps he had a chip on his shoulder and felt that he had something to prove after his older brother Anthony, an associate of the Gambino family, was murdered on the suspicion that he was an informant. Or maybe he was just crazy. But while Tommy seemed to have no conscience, he was capable of being sentimental. During one of his arrests after his father passed away, DeSimone is noted for having a tattoo of a cross on his right arm that said, "In memory of Pop." His own mother would tell police investigators that her youngest child was considerate but had a temper when provoked. During a police interview, FBI investigators noted that he seemed to have average intelligence while also being an extremely nervous person who was provoked to antagonism when confronted with stressful situations. It was also noted in his file that he never served in the armed forces and was given a draft registration of 1Y on June 17, 1970, which made him not fit for military service due to his pending legal difficulties. While he might have beaten the charges for the fur truck hijacking, DeSimone was sentenced on April 11, 1975 to 10 years in prison from another hijacking incident. His prison stint began at Lewisburg Federal Prison, but on October 18, 1978, due to good behavior, he was transferred to the Manhattan Community Treatment Center. This was essentially a halfway house, and he was allowed to freely roam the city so long as he was back by curfew. And there would be times when he would not make it on time, but a bribe to the right person kept his paperwork in order. Less than 2 months later, on December 11th, Tommy DeSimone was part of the crew that committed the notorious Lufthansa heist, which at the time was the largest cash robbery in American history. He would later become a loose end in the investigation for mastermind Jimmy the Gent Burke when it was revealed that Tommy took off his mask when it was too hot and a witness saw his face. But this tip did not have time to develop into a lead for investigators as the people involved in the crime began to be killed off violently. Just after the robbery, when law enforcement was closing in, DeSimone was ordered by heist mastermind Jimmy Burke to kill Stax Edwards. Stax had a minor role in the robbery with his task to pick up the van used in the heist and then drive it to New Jersey for it to be disposed. Instead of doing that, he parked it on the street and it was full of his fingerprints. It was just a matter of time before the police would connect him. DeSimone and Angelo Seppi tracked Stax down, and DeSimone shot him 5 times in the head. It's very likely that Stax Edwards was the last person Tommy killed, because on January 14, 1979, his wife Angela reported him missing to the police. According to her, she had not seen her husband for weeks. He is assumed to be dead since he has not resurfaced in almost 50 years, and there are many theories regarding who killed him, why, and how. The main circumstances for his murder come from Henry Hill. According to him, Tommy was told by Paul Vario that he was going to become a made member of the Lucchese family shortly after the Lufthansa heist occurred. During the week after Christmas, Burke and Hill were in Florida to work on a drug deal when Tommy was picked up by Paul Vario's son, Peter, and Bruno Facciolo and taken to what he thought was going to be an induction ceremony. Instead, it was an ambush for his own murder. Hill said that the motive for the murder was payback for killing Billy Batts and Foxy, mainly because Billy Batts was a made member of the Gambino family and the killing was unsanctioned. Hill would also go on to later say, after his book was published, that Tommy had also assaulted Hill's wife Karen, and that played a factor in Vario deciding to have him killed. In this version of his death, he is killed quickly. Another theory is that Jimmy the Gent Burke either killed or had Tommy killed because of his role in the Lufthansa heist. In Burke's paranoia, He suspected that Tommy had become a police informant and had him killed before he could talk. A third account of his death comes from mob informant Joe Iannuzzi. According to him, Gambino Capo regime Thomas Agro bragged to him about killing DeSimone in 1985. In this version, Tommy, thinking he was going to a Mafia induction ceremony, is instead brought to a house where Agro, John Gotti, and others were waiting for him. In this telling of events, Agro, supervised as John Gotti, slowly tortured Tommy DeSimone to death as revenge for killing his friend Billy Batts. In another version, Gotti is still the assassin, but he kills Tommy quickly with 3 gunshots to the head. Agro also claimed to have been the one to kill Anthony DeSimone and would often joke about maybe killing the remaining brother Robert so he could take out the DeSimone trifecta. While the Mafia knew he was dead, the government did not. In the summer of 1979, he became a wanted man for violating his parole. But the search for Tommy DeSimone went nowhere. DeSimone's body was never found. Some people suspect that it was buried in a Mafia graveyard that is known as the Hole, a barren area on the Brooklyn-Queens border where the body of Bonanno Capo's Sonny, Red Indelicato, was found. After Bonanno boss Joe Messino became an informant in 2005, the area was excavated and more bodies were found, but DeSimone was not among them. Either that was not his final resting place or he had decomposed already.